What are your strongest memories from when you were 10 to 30? Okay, imagine this. You're heading to dinner to meet your lifelong best friend and his new wife, Serafina. You've never met her, and your friend decided not to tell his wife anything about you. You all sit down at dinner, you order a bottle of Cabernet, pita bread, dips for the table. And it doesn't take long before Serafina asks, "So tell me about your life. What would you like to know? Tell me the whole story. We're going to be in each other's lives. Take me to the beginning. I want to know everything." So you sip wine, you start to enter a series of queries into the Google search bar of your brain's memory database. Hey brain, what are the top events from our life that are most central to our life story? Your brain replies, remember that one time we saw Eddie Murphy live and we laughed so hard? That was awesome. Yeah, that was pretty awesome, you think, but central to my life story? Nah. So you refine your memory retrieval attempts until you cobble together a cohesive series of events and manage to put them in chronological order until you have an answer that doesn't sound like Chris Farley interviewing Paul McCartney in SNL circa 1993. You take another sip of wine and get started. Well, I was born, blah, blah, blah. Then my sister was born. Then we moved to that house, blah, blah. I met my first girlfriend, et cetera, et cetera. Well, let's take a step back. We're all autonomous individuals, aren't we? Individualism is a central aspect of Western society, especially in modern times. Constraints on the type of life we choose to live have progressively fallen away over time. Good parents teach their kids, you can be whoever you want to be, right? Well, a few years back, the folks down in the research lab had an idea. They heard about your dinner with your friend and his wife, and they wondered what would happen if they asked hundreds of people to tell their life stories. Would they get hundreds of wildly different variations? In many studies conducted over many years across many countries, researchers asked people over 40 to tell the story of their lives. What did they find? Did anyone else mention that Eddie Murphy concert? Well, I'm going to cover 3 of the primary findings from that research here today. 1 about cultural life scripts, 2 about an idea called the Reminiscence bump, and 3rd, something I call the midlife story gap. So in the first section, cultural life scripts. We all have scripts in our minds for how things work. When you go out to eat, you get seated, you review the menu, you place your order, you eat, and then you duck out the back before the bill comes. These scripts help us communicate about and navigate through recurring complex situations in life. It turns out we have shared scripts for life too. Here's a quote. A life script represents a series of life events that take place in a specific order, and it represents a prototypical life course within a certain culture, says Annette Bond. When researchers analyzed hundreds of personal life stories, they found incredible similarity in the types of the events mentioned in these stories. It included things that probably won't surprise you, like having children, getting married, beginning school, falling in love, retiring, a parent's death, your first job, taking a long trip, etc. Across various studies, 40 to 60% of the events mentioned in individual life stories matched the cultural life scripts where they lived. This alignment was higher in research done in places like Denmark than it was in places like the United States, probably due to a more homogeneous culture. So what's going on here? There are 2 sides to it. Number 1 is a function of storytelling and memory. Remember that dinner with your friend and his new wife I mentioned at the beginning? You selected key events from your life to include, and you left other things out. Your decisions about that were influenced by the cultural life script understood by everybody around the dinner table that night. When you tell a story, getting an education comes before getting a job, which comes before getting a home. You left out the story about getting robbed on a train in Europe because it didn't fit into a cohesive life narrative. It didn't fit inside an easy-to-tell story. And here's where things get interesting. Think of how often you've told someone the version of your life story. The more often you recall memories, the longer they last. The longer you go without telling that story of being robbed, the more it fades from your memory. Over time, your individual life story matches the cultural life script in your mind. Now, number 2 is a function of life choices. As we live, it's easier to make life choices that match the cultural life script we've all inherited. If you decide to go to college after high school, people are going to pat you on the back. If you choose to move to India and study under a guru after high school, you're probably going to find yourself explaining your reasoning and defending your choice a little bit more. More people follow the cultural life script. Now, I'm not arguing this is good or bad here. I'm explaining one reason why so many aspects of individual life stories match the cultural life script, as was found in the research. As a little interlude, if you think you'd like to get this kind of content as a free newsletter sent to your inbox every Sunday morning, visit secondactcreator.com to sign up today. And our second section is about the reminiscence bump. When the research team asked people to recount significant events in their lives as part of their life stories, they also asked, what age did those events occur? How important were they to you? And to what degree were they happy or sad events? When they crunched the numbers, they found 2 unexpected things. Now, the first thing they found was that the events included in people's autobiographical life stories are highly clustered between the age of 10 and 30. This is now referred to as the reminiscence bump. As you can see in this chart, the happiest reported memories peak in your late 20s. There are several explanations for the reminiscence bump, and one of them is the cultural life scripts theory that we're talking about here today, that our inherited life scripts are front-loaded for cultural reasons. If a culture does not reliably guide its members into behaviors that extend the culture, such as having children, it won't last very long. The second thing that they found that was unexpected was that these events that cluster between the ages of 10 and 30 are almost always happy memories. They're positive. For one, sad events make up a minimum number of what people reported when they told their life stories. More interestingly, though, unlike the happy events, sad events do not peak between the age of 10 and 30. They don't correlate with age at all. As we can see again here in the chart, while it may look like sad events increase as we age, they don't. Instead, it's just that people are more likely to include recent sad events in their life stories. As time passes, people cull sad events from their life stories. I covered a variation of this idea in my newsletter called Rose-Colored Distortions. Here's section 3, what I call the midlife story gap. The reminiscence bump research shows that only about 20% of significant life events that are reported occur after the age of 30, and that's not due to the age of the participants telling the stories. In our cultural life scripts, the plot gets awful thin after 30. Bummer. Well, why is this? Now, given my interest in charming Gen X friends like you that are navigating midlife, I asked the research team to conduct another study. This one asked people aged 38 to 76 to nominate life events they expected a person their age to experience in the future. And in short, they asked, what comes after the reminiscence bump? Of the 28 events mentioned by more than 4% of people, here are the top 9 in order of how many people mentioned those. Travel and leisure, retire, have grandchildren, move and sell a house, someone else's death, disease, your own death, an offspring goes to college, or an offspring gets married. So we had kind of 2 big life ideas, retirement and travel, and then 3 on death and disease, and 3 on children and grandchildren, which is us beginning to live through the cultural life scripts of others. That's it. Even when prompted about key events in midlife and beyond, this research shows that the best ideas we have as a culture in our cultural life scripts are, I guess I'll retire one day and travel. Think about the types of things I mentioned as typical life story events. Leave home, go to university, get married, retire, etc. They're all transitions. I lived with my parents, then I left home and I lived with roommates. Something changed, right? One way to think about the midlife story gap is that nothing really changes. You're just showing up at work every day, 35, at 45, at 55. I mean, no one's going to watch that movie. Scene 37, the hero goes to work again. In terms of cultural life scripts, there isn't much given to us for this window of life. Kids leave home, take a big trip, maybe a grandchild appears. But from the end of that reminiscence bump at 30, all the way to retirement, the cultural story is more like an HR training video than a summer blockbuster. With Second Act Creator, I want to expand your thinking on ways to flourish in midlife. A part of this will be to generate more creative life story ideas for midlife, since the cultural life script is not there to help us like it was in our 20s. Let's remember the clock is ticking. As I mentioned in my newsletter, Your Life in Weeks, if the average life lasts 4,000 weeks, at 52, for example, I have about 1,300 weeks remaining. I want to take advantage of. What are the personally meaningful life events you could insert into your life story? I like to think about things that will add to my well-being during midlife and or prepare me for health and well-being in my later years. And all that goes well beyond financial planning for retirement. I'll dig into this idea over time in my newsletter and in these videos with frameworks to help you write a more creative, fulfilling midlife story. I hope you'll stick around to work on this with me. If you enjoyed this content, subscribe to this channel, keep learning, and embrace your next chapter with purpose and confidence. If you think you'd like to get this kind of content in a newsletter delivered to your inbox every Sunday morning, visit secondactcreator.com.